So I've been reading your dispatches, if that's the word, that RT has been publishing, and your tweets. And from the beginning of this mess in Afghanistan, or this phase of the mess, your priority has been getting the Americans out, and you have a lot of empathy for your fellow Marines. You're a former Marine intelligence officer, and I saw that you were reacting to some folks who were carrying on as if it's some sort of a PR stunt for the Marine station there to be feeding the babies and cutting them and so forth. Can you say a little bit about that?
Sure. Look, I'll be the first one to acknowledge that propaganda is a reality, and that nations engage in propaganda, and that the U.S. Department of Defense, the United States Air Force, the United States Army, the United States Marine Corps as institutions will exploit imagery to their advantage. So if a photograph appears that shows, for instance, a Marine in a good light, this image will get significant airtime and it'll be pushed by government-linked outlets.
And the media and everybody. It's just kind of natural for that to resonate.
And I understand, having extensively criticized my government for its policies in the Middle East, including the manner in which we got into Afghanistan, and the manner in which we have behaved in Afghanistan for the past 20 years. And I think I'm more notably known for my opposition to Iraq and the lies told about weapons of mass destruction. So I'm extremely critical of my government, its policies, and I'm sympathetic to those who are skeptical of anything that could be seen as propaganda by the government to somehow whitewash or explain away the mistakes of policy that have been made. Having said that, as a Marine who has been in harm's way, as a Marine who understands exactly what's going on with these other Marines, these junior Marines that are in Afghanistan, who have been put in a humanitarian disaster that is not of their own. They had nothing to do with this. They are not policymakers. They are policy implementers.
Right.
Believe me, if they were sent to kill Afghans in combat, they would, without hesitation. But this is a mission that's humanitarian in nature. Their job is to secure an airfield, to facilitate the evacuation of American citizens, of the citizens of allied nations, and Afghan citizens of special needs. For instance, interpreters and their families who supported us during this 20-year conflict, who, because they supported us, could be at risk at the hands of the Taliban, since they have now taken over Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So that's their job.
It's almost ridiculous that you would even have to explain it. To me, it's such an obvious difference between policy and what these guys are asked to do right now.
But people who are anti-war don't have. The problem is they think the Marine is the decision maker.
Yeah, I know, and it's not that complicated either. It's not like it's something that's hard to.
They also condemn the Marine for the act of becoming a Marine.
Yeah, and accuse them of participating in this propaganda. Now, you weren't responding to Caitlin Johnstone in particular. Are you familiar with her by any chance? Yeah. So she's one of these anti-war independent journalists, and I got into it with her because she was acting like the Marines were participating in this propaganda.
Yeah, like a Marine picked up a baby and said, "Hey, take a picture of me."
Yeah, like they would otherwise be hostile to babies.
Immediately put it down and kick it away like a discarded plastic bottle.
Yeah, it's crazy. So
it's not just that, but also let me just say this to all the pacifists out there. Mm-hmm. You're able to be a pacifist because the Marine Corps exists, and if you don't recognize that, you're idiots. Okay? We live in a dangerous world. We live in a world full of wolves who are baying in the background, who are hungry, and will come and eat you if you don't have the Marines out there to stop them. That doesn't mean that the Marines aren't abused by their government. The Marines aren't sent to do things that shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
Of course they are. But at the end of the day, the Marine Corps and institutions like the Marine Corps secure the world from those who wish to do it harm.
Right. It's not the best time to be criticizing Marines right now, given the mission.
There's never a good time to criticize Marines.
It's an especially bad. You know what I mean. It's an especially bad time. They're in a very precarious situation. Yeah. So I was. By the way, your Twitter handle is Real Scott Ritter, and I've been following your commentary there and also on RT. And I saw that you linked to a post by a former Army Ranger named Jericho Denman. And I don't know if you're even familiar with him or if it's just something you found. But let's just back up like a day or two. Even before the bombings that happened within the past 24 hours, he wrote this account of what it's like for the Marines to be on the airport there. And I found that riveting and very moving. And I mean, and he didn't even get into all the details, like where are these Marines sleeping, eating, what are the toilet facilities like, anything like that. But he was describing how difficult it is to be swarmed by people and not knowing who to let in and having babies tossed at them. What you are, I know you're a former Marine intelligence officer, and I also know that you've studied Afghan tribes. And you were an advisor during the Soviet war in Afghanistan. So even though you're not on the ground right now, I know you know quite a bit. But what is it actually like for them now on the ground?
Well, let's put it this way. The Marine Corps today, because we have to talk about the Marines that are serving today. Mm-hmm. Every enlisted Marine, when they go through boot camp, they have a final exercise called the Crucible. And I think it's a dozen or so extremely challenging tasks. Each one is named after a former Marine who gave his all, a Medal of Honor winner and stuff. For instance, when they talk about John Basilone in Guadalcanal, you have to go through an obstacle carrying ammo cans because he, delivered ammunition from one machine gun nest to the other during the Battle of Guadalcanal. And at the end of each thing, a Marine stands up and tells them the story. So the Marines become imbued with the history. It's what makes Marines different from everybody else, because we truly believe the propaganda is spoon-fed while we go through training. We buy into it. It becomes part of our DNA. Marines are trained to do amazing things, but awful things. We're trained to kill. We're one of the last services that actually trains to use the bayonet. I mean, the art of putting a piece of metal into a human body, twisting it so that you kill them. That's what we're trained to do. We're trained to poop in cans, poop in holes, pee in bottles. We're trained to go days without taking a proper bath. We're trained to, call in close air support. We're trained to evacuate wounded people. We're trained to do everything except stand at an airport and make life and death decisions about women and children, who can get on an airplane, who can't. A Marine can go through a lot of stuff and walk away from it and shrug it off because they're trained to do that. You're not trained to sit there and stare in the eyes of a mother as she's holding up her child, knowing that if you don't point at her and bring her over, they might die, making those life and death decisions. They're not trained for this. And this, I think, was the point of the article. Yeah. Is that these Marines, even before the bombing took place, let me put it this way. The Marines will respond better to the bombing than they will to making these life and death decisions. The bombing, as tragic as it is and was, and horrible, is what Marines, they're better equipped to deal with violence than they are to deal with the heart-rending life and death decision of picking who gets to live and who doesn't. Marines don't want to play God in that way. They don't mind killing people if they have to, because that's what they're trained to do. Close with and destroy the enemy through firepower maneuver. Tough bummer. If you're the enemy, you're dead. But the women and children aren't the enemy. Right. The men that are with them, the fathers, aren't the enemy. Indeed, in many cases, they're our friends. They're the people who helped us, interpreters who actually saved the lives of fellow Marines during prior deployments. And they're now standing there begging to be given the assistance they were promised by the U.S. government, which the U.S. government has failed to deliver on, and now has put the Marine in the position playing bad guy.
Right. And of course they have to follow orders. unlike Jericho Denman, who wrote that post that we're talking about, he's a veteran, and he's part of a group of veterans that are there now helping evacuate people. How much of that is going on? Do you know?
Well, I mean, I don't personally know. In Twitter, there's an aspect of called Twitter, military Twitter. And in there's a significant veteran network of Afghan veterans, many of them who have a special operations background, many of them who are linked to these SIVs, these special immigrant visa holders. And they have connections both to the Afghans and to their fellow soldiers who are still on active duty who are in Kabul International Airport. And I know that there's a significant effort to serve as a facilitator of communications. For instance, if an Afghan interpreter and his family can't get into the airport, they're blocked, they will contact these veterans who will contact their point of contact at Kabul International Airport and say, hey, Joe, you got anybody on the north wall? They'll say, yeah, we got Frank. Well, tell Frank I got a guy in a green shirt, his wife's wearing an orange skirt, and his kid's wearing yellow. They need to come over. Here, I'm sending you the letter of recommendation I wrote. This guy worked for me, saved my life. Oh, yeah, I remember him. Yeah, and they call Frank, and Frank looks over the wall, and there he is. Pull him up, and they bring them over. There's a lot of that going on right now.
Right.
That I can say.
What about prior to that point, though? Are people like Jericho helping folks get through the mob from wherever it is that folks are stranded?
You know, I don't know, but let me tell you this. The task of leaving the perimeter of Kabul International Airport and going into the city of Kabul, where the Taliban are, is not for the faint of heart. Yeah. And if people like Jericho and other veterans are in Kabul, leaving the perimeter, going into Kabul and hitting people, God bless them, because that's one of the most dangerous missions I could think of. They don't have the official blessing of the U.S. government. They're not covered by any deconfliction agreement that exists between the U.S. military and the Taliban. They're laying it all on the line in the hope and prayer that they can get away with it without being shot or captured or something else bad happening. I don't know if that's happening, but if they're doing that, then it's one of the most dangerous things I could imagine a civilian doing, because these aren't military people.
Right. Right. And
civilians right now.
Yeah. Right. Well, do you think there's any chance that active duty military personnel are performing clandestine missions that aren't being publicized, or are they in fact all really actually limited to the airport?
Well, first of all, it's clandestine. We should know about it. So you know, I can't say that I know of anything. What I will say is this.
Come on, we're in Orwell's. This is where the real deal is uncovered. Yeah. I'm not asking for specifics. Just is it going on?
Say this, that a special operations helicopter unit deployed a couple weeks ago into Kabul International Airport. This unit specializes in nighttime flying. And they can provide a variety of capabilities, one of which is, of course, security. They're armed, and they can provide close-in fire support if needed. But these are the same helicopters that are used to transport special operations forces on on clandestine or covert missions. They specialize in flying lights out in hostile areas and getting you to a specific point on the ground, plus or minus 20 seconds, anywhere in the world. If they say they're going to be in the North Pole at 7:30 p.m. on Thursday, they will be there either between 7:29:30 or 7:30:30, and they will not fail. That's how good they are, and no one will know that they're there until they arrive. So these helicopters are there. They're capable of doing things. My understanding is that the CIA has certain assets that they cannot risk attempting to get into Kabul International Airport in a manner that would expose them to the Taliban, that these assets are held up in safe houses in and around Kabul, and that these helicopters are working with the CIA to rescue these assets. They also may be doing the same tactics to rescue Americans that are in difficult situations. If they're not, they should be. And if they are, I really don't want to know about it until this mission's over.
Yeah. Well, and on the subject of it not really being for public consumption, I have similar thoughts about this deadline. A lot of people are wanting Biden or whomever's representing the U.S. to get tough and say, no, we're not going to honor that deadline. But the fact that it's not being said doesn't mean we are going to honor the deadline, right? I mean, is it that important? It sounds like some silly ego thing to be lusting for somebody to say, no, we're not going to obey the deadline. It's about what you do, not what you say, isn't it, in that regard?
Unfortunately, in this case, it's what Biden said. Biden committed to the 31 August deadline, and the Taliban's holding them to account. The Taliban has made it clear that this is a red line.
That's true, but I'm saying if we meaning the U.S., doesn't honor that deadline, is it necessary for it to be announced that we're not going to honor it?
Well, no, but on September 1st, if we're still there, we're all going to die.
Yeah. Now, you say September 1st. That's actually another question, because you were just talking about being very precise. Is the deadline August 31st at the stroke of midnight after the 30th, or is it August 31st at night right before September 1st?
It's when August 31st ends and September 1st begins.
Okay, well that gives us more time. That's better, but I mean, is that understood by everybody?
It's understood by the Taliban. They've made it clear to the United States. Look, the Taliban right now is doing everything possible to get us out of Afghanistan. Right. We made a mistake by not empowering them more. Had we empowered them more with information, with a level of collaboration, maybe this bombing would have taken place. I mean, one of the things that was frustrating today is listening to General McKenzie say, we've given them some intelligence and they've used that intelligence to preempt attacks. But we haven't given them all intelligence. Well, maybe if you gave them all the intelligence, they might have stopped this attack. I mean, the hubris, the arrogance of the United States in this. You know, we've been working with the Taliban to undermine the Afghan government for years now. We've been collaborating with the Taliban since May of this year to achieve this very result, the departure of the United States without the loss of American troops. We can no longer say that because Americans have died. But we did this knowing that in doing so, we're abandoning the Afghan government. You know, we're the worst friends in the world, but we're stupid because having entrusted the Taliban to the degree necessary to get us to the point of you know, almost being out of Afghanistan, we now have to play what, tough guy at the end. You know, if we're going to play tough guy, we should have retaken Bagram Air Base and used that as the place to get out. Bagram Air Base being the former U.S. military installation located north of Kabul, far away from civilian.
Well, that's one of the things I'm wondering about. But also, just to finish with this point, as far as it being an intelligence failure, the other issue is the screening process even adequate? You know, depending, you know, even if the intelligence is what it should be. And all I just have a vague sense of chaos. I don't have a clear picture of what the screening process is. Are the Taliban, for example, putting their hands on women who show up? Because isn't that a violation of Sharia law?
Well, the Taliban will beat women. They've pushed women. They've executed women. I mean, you know, when you know, they're not supposed to have relations with women, but the religious police historically have put hands on women. You know, as long as a woman's wearing a burqa, they'll push them down to the ground. They'll beat them, you know, and things of that nature. So they're not prohibited from touching the women. They're you know, especially if the woman is violating Islamic law.
Well, I'm talking about if a female shows up at the airport, are they frisking women?
At the airport, she should show up with a male counterpart, and the male will present the documentation. That's the way it should be. There should be no unaccompanied women showing up. Anybody who's in Afghanistan, let's put it this way. If you're in Afghanistan, you think you can approach a Taliban checkpoint as a single female, you're an idiot. You know, you have no right being in Afghanistan. You know the drill. Even before the Taliban came in, women don't walk around unaccompanied. I mean, that's just a reality.
Well, I'm asking because one of the theories I heard being kicked around was that that suicide bomber was a female, and that's not that anybody says for sure that's what happened, but it was put out there as a possibility. So I was wondering whether or not.
I don't know. I mean, that you know, wouldn't be the first time that the terrorist is dressed up in a burqa to disguise explosives and blow things up. But also, if you take a look at the women that are outside that gate, there's not too many burqa-wearing women that were outside. Most of them were in traditional Afghan garb, but with headscarves. But you didn't see too many veiled women because these are women who are trying to get away from that. So the one thing that would stick out more than anything else in the world is a burqa-wearing individual coming up to the north gate,
Yeah.
Or to Abbey Gate in this case.
So what about Bagram? Why was that airfield closed?
That airfield was closed because the Biden administration believed that we would have up to 3 to 6 months to get everybody out, that the Afghan government wasn't going to collapse in as rapid fashion as it did. Mm-hmm. So we closed Bagram Air Base, and next thing you know, it's over. Taliban's in Kabul, and we don't have a plan.
But the other thing was, from what I read, there was not even any communication with the Afghan commanders that we were pulling out, and ransackers came in even before the Afghan army took control of it. And I don't know, there may be an explanation for that, but remember, I'm just an idiot civilian who doesn't know anything about military operations. Help me understand, how could that happen? Why would that happen?
Well, the reason why it happens is that you have a military commander on the ground who's putting force protection above everything else. Mm-hmm. And the most vulnerable moment in a withdrawal is the last aircraft leaving the ground, because you have no security. Mm-hmm. You're putting everything on this last airplane and you're taking off, and that's it. But you don't want to advertise when that's going to happen, because if you advertise when that's going to happen, then bad guys can take advantage of that and make very bad things happen.
Okay, so that makes sense.
They put force security, force protection over this, but again, that's absurd because I could have handled that differently. I could have helicoptered in some Rangers who are experts at airfield seizure and protection, and used them to secure the airfield while we administratively evacuated the non-combatant aspect of it. And then in the end, we do we put the Rangers on helicopters and they fly out. We could have trusted our Afghan counterparts to say, we need your help in securing the airfield, but we don't trust the Afghan government.
Right.
Remember, we're abandoning them to surrender and death. We know that. We know that they're not going to win. We know they're not going to prevail. There is no future for the Afghan army or government as we withdraw. We know this. They know it. They'll fake it as long as we're there. But the moment we leave, it's all over. It's all she wrote. Katie Barr shut the barn, man. All
right, so are we guilty of being Monday morning quarterbacks, spewing out our 2020 hindsight, or was it really a stupid thing to do to clear out of Bagram in the way that it happened? I mean, was that an obvious mistake?
Well, I think the timing is the issue. If we thought that a non-combatant evacuation was going to be necessary, then we needed to hold on to Bagram longer than we did. We needed to extend our stay. But what was happening is the Pentagon was panicking as we were drawing down. The Afghan army was collapsing. The Taliban were making rapid advances. Remember, we were supposed to be out by September 11th. And yet the Pentagon is saying, oh, no, we're out here well before that. I mean, I think we shut down Bagram sometime in late July. So we just artificially accelerated to get the hell out of town, and we abandoned our Afghan partners. I mean, this is literally one of the most disgusting displays of American untrustworthiness that has ever occurred. And we didn't even treat the South Vietnamese as bad.
Yeah, I mean, it seems horrendous, but I always like to allow for the possibility that things aren't as they seem, and that's why I'm trying to.
This is as it seems. We abandoned these people. We're the most horrible ally on the face of Europe.
So, what should happen now?
In a perfect world?
Well, I don't know. Answer it however you will.
In a perfect world, we need to disengage militarily in Afghanistan, and then recognize that we have a moral obligation to bring stability in Afghanistan. and to recognize that that requires us to work with the Taliban and to work with Afghanistan's neighbors, inclusive of Iran, China, Russia, Pakistan, to create the conditions for economic stability, political stability, economic viability. We owe it to the people of Afghanistan to make this happen. We destroyed their country after 20 years of war. Everything we did was wrong. It's the opposite of the Midas touch. We touch it, it dies. We need to recognize that we're not the solution, we're the problem, unless we're willing to work with neighbors on their agendas, not on our agendas. Our agenda should right now be totally unselfish in nature, to bring stability to Afghanistan for the first time in over 40 years. That's not going to happen. None of what I just said is going to happen. What's going to happen is that we are going to seek to punish the Taliban. We're going to impose sanctions on the Taliban. We're going to provide covert assistance to resistance movements that are organized in north of Kabul. We're going to perpetuate instability in the region. And in doing so, we're going to create a geographical area of chaos, of ungovernable space in which organizations like ISIS-K, ISIS Khorasan, will grow, will thrive, and then they'll seek to export their terrorism abroad, and will attack our allies and maybe even attack us. But that's what's going to happen because we're stupid, we don't learn, and history repeats itself.
But what should happen more immediately with respect to helping people get out and so forth right now?
Well, I think that the CIA director who flew to Kabul on Monday and met with the head of the Taliban, ironically a man that we CIA had captured, tortured, imprisoned in Guantanamo Bay. And this man has the humanity to sit down with the CIA director and not kill him. We met with them to discuss the August 31st deadline and what's going to happen afterwards. I think the Taliban is fully aware that it cannot succeed in governing Afghanistan if the United States is aligned against it. That the best hope for the Taliban is to get the United States to agree that if the Taliban behaves properly, doesn't treat women like animals, that it does in fact keep Al-Qaeda from reforming, that it does in fact seek to eradicate ISIS-K, and it behaves as a good neighbor, not exporting Islamic revolution across the borders, that if that's the case, then the United States will work with the Taliban on rebuilding Afghanistan. That's their hope. And I think Burns, the CIA director, said the only way that's going to happen is if you understand that when we leave, there's probably going to be several hundred Americans that will make it. And we need to have a mechanism to get them out without drama. Meaning, we don't want to be sending Delta Force to rescue these people. We need you to say, oh, you're here? Okay, come here. We're going to keep you here tonight. Here's some food. Here's some water. Here's a bus to the border. And we're going to get you over the border to Pakistan, get you on the American consulate in Peshawar. And I think that's what's going to happen next. The American troops are going to leave, and then we're going to see a situation where the Taliban are going to halt the brain drain. I mean, think about it. They need to govern Afghanistan. They're inheriting power plants. The Taliban doesn't know anything about operating a power plant. They need engineers to do that. They need the engineers that are operating the power plant today to stay in Afghanistan and continue to operate the power plant. These guys are leaving. The Taliban rightfully says, you can't leave. You got to stay here. We need all you smart people to stay here and make this country succeed. So they're going to focus on getting the right people into the right places to do the right thing, make Afghanistan succeed as a nation state. And therefore, the last thing they're going to do is go, oh, there's a bunch of Americans here, we're going to treat them as hostages. No, they're going to, while they seek to stabilize Afghanistan, they're going to do their best to make sure that they don't give the United States any excuse to either re-engage militarily or to try and strangle Afghanistan economically.
Did you see that Ambassador Wilson said that very strong warnings have been given out for weeks to Americans in Afghanistan, and hey, tough luck, more or less. They should have heeded the warning. It's not our fault. Did you catch that?
I've caught that, and I've caught similar sentiments.
Is there anything to that?
Well, yeah, of course there is. I mean,
well, I mean, who are these people that are still there? I mean, I guess they're in different categories. Some of them are doing contract work for the U.S. government, and I don't know. How does it break down who these people are and why they didn't get out? Were they given assurances? Is that why they didn't get out, or is it their fault?
I mean, again, remember that the collapse of the Afghan government took everybody by surprise.
Mm-hmm.
So when people said get out, there wasn't a sense of urgency. Get out by when? Get out as soon as possible. What's the deadline? If you're a contractor, and let's look at this irony right here. We have right now in Kabul International Airport between 500 and 600 former Afghan Army commandos who work very closely with the United States. They are paid for by the United States, by the American taxpayer, through a line item budget that comes in and is supposed to be delivered. We said we're no longer going to pay that budget line, meaning they're working for free right now because nobody's paying. But the point I bring up in that is, even in the midst of this, had somebody not stepped in and stopped it, money was going to be just distributed to pay these soldiers, meaning we're going to put money in a bank account. And the reason why I bring that up is that there are hundreds, if not thousands, of contracts ongoing in Afghanistan as we speak. Civilian development programs, military support programs, government support programs, education support programs, all of which are paid for by U.S. taxpayers and which require contractors on the ground to carry them out.
Right.
And so we have tens of thousands of Americans employed gainfully in Afghanistan carrying out these contracts. Now, when we say get out when? When the contract's over, because they have a contractual obligation.
So is that for the most part who these Americans are, the contractors, or there are other types of Americans there too? Academics, or people who just like Afghanistan culture, or people who fell in love.
Families.
Yeah.
People have extended families. There's any number of Americans who have extended families in Afghanistan, who are over there caring for their elderly parents, caring for a sister, visiting people,
right.
And they're not all from downtown Kabul. They're in Helmand province. They're down in Kandahar. They're up in Nangarhar. They're everywhere. Some of them may not have access to TV or radio and might not have a freaking clue what's going on.
Right.
And they're there. We found out in California sent 25 students on a student field trip, a summer field trip or something. Right. I mean, I still don't know what's going on with this one, but right. There's all sorts of people there.
Right. And we have a couple of members of Congress who went over there too.
Showed up, yeah.
Now that generated some controversy. Do you have any thoughts about whether or not it was appropriate for them to take that trip?
Let me put it this way: if you're a member of Congress and you have a legitimate oversight function, you do what you need to do, man. Mm-hmm. That's your job.
Right.
You're the president can't say, okay, you're an equal branch of government. Tell the president, stick in his ear. Also tell the president, you haven't been telling us everything. We don't trust you. We don't trust the executive branch to tell us what's going on. We have an independent investigatory process. And you tell the military that pound sand. I'm a congressional. I am the priority right now because I'm the guy that writes the checks that pays you. So it's just a bunch of whining. It's just
I think so. Well, you never know who to believe. Everybody's got they're pushing their agendas. Philip Mudd, this former CIA, former FBI guy who's always seems to be perpetually in a rage, was carrying on about how it supposedly took away seats that could have been used for evacuees, but then others said, oh, that's not true.
It's not true.
And then he also claimed, it would tie up the military, like as if the two Congress members required their hands to be held by a lot of people for a long period of time.
When congressmen show up, they get command attention.
Right, but a lot? I mean, isn't it more or less the same as reporters walking around there? I mean,
No. These are U.S. congressmen.
No, I know.
No, this is a big deal, and but that's the military's job.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Phil Mudd could just pound sand. I mean, look, this is a guy who lied to America about weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. He's a piece of trash. He's literally one of the worst human beings on the face of the earth. CNN gives him a platform. I don't know why. Phil, if you're hearing me, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know, he's just not a good man. And for him to sit here and cry and moan and all that stuff, Phil knows that when he was, in the CIA and he was given a task, he would go make visits to commands and expect to be given, the appropriate respect. And he wasn't a congressman. This is an elected representative of the United States of America with official oversight capacity. They made a decision that they need to go over there. Went through a little bit of grandstanding on their part. You're not a politician if you don't grandstand.
Yeah, it's not mutually exclusive to grandstand and also, exercise legitimate oversight. It's both.
Democracy's inconvenient. Democracy's inconvenient. But no, I have no problem with them going over, especially if they can make the case that they weren't getting the answers.
All right, so I stand corrected. They require more attention than reporters do.
Oh yeah, they require significant attention.
But nonetheless, they are partially, performing the role of a reporter too. I mean, you can use the word oversight, but basically they're reporting what they saw. I mean, we don't have.
Well, they're gathering information. Their job isn't necessarily to tell this information to the American people. Mm-hmm. It's their job to tell it to Congress. Mm-hmm. In whatever manner they want. But
have they disclosed anything to the public about what they saw?
I haven't seen it. That doesn't mean they haven't done it.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
I haven't seen it, but
I saw people getting outraged by it, but I didn't see what they said. So
you literally everybody's inconvenienced by Congress until you need them. I mean that's just the point. It would for the military, they prefer they weren't around because you don't want them seeing things you don't want them to see. I mean, a guy says, "Hey, what's that?" Oh, I don't want to have to explain that to you because we, X, Y, and Z. And if you're the executive branch, you don't want Congress questioning your policies. I'm sorry, democracy is ugly. Democracy is inconvenient. And democracy doesn't function unless representatives in Congress do their job. And remember, this is bipartisan. This is a Democrat and a Republican.
And they're both veterans. We should mention that too.
They're both veterans who are questioning what the hell's going on in Kabul. And I'll tell you what, after what happened today, I hope more people question what the hell's going on in Kabul.
Yeah. Well, I have a question that I think a lot of people are wondering, and I know that you can't impart your vast knowledge of Afghan tribes succinctly, but try anyway, please. Here's the thing, and I think I'm not the only one who's wondering, why is the Afghan army so incapable of fighting off the Taliban without U.S. support, despite having the advantage in numbers and equipment? Don't they come from the same talent pool, so to speak, as the Taliban?
Well, they come from the same genetic pool.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say the same talent pool. First of all, let's start off with the Taliban. Primarily tribal. These are guys who live in the mountains under very tough conditions. These are tough guys. These are West Virginia hillbillies. These are Kentucky boys, Ozark Mountain boys. Whatever tough group you can come up with, that's what these guys are times 10.
Right.
And they're committed. They believe in what they're doing, and they're, most importantly, willing to die for their cause. Death is just a reality. They believe that if they die, they die in support of something better than them. They go to heaven, 70 virgins, whatever it is. But these are people who are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice for their cause. Now, you say, well, why can't we get Afghans to believe in that? Well, what cause are they supporting, first of all? One of the things we failed to do when we first went in was to create a national government worthy of the loyalty of the people of Afghanistan. We were advised early on to do something called a Loya Jirga, which is a gathering of tribal heads who would then select the leader of Afghanistan. We went through the motions. We created a Loya Jirga of people we picked to be this tribal heads. We excluded people that were inconvenient to us. And then instead of letting them pick, we said, and you have to pick Hamid Karzai. So it was a fate. And so Hamid Karzai, a minor Afghan politician, prior to us hand-picking him to be the leader of Afghanistan, became the leader and nobody believed in him. Plus he was corrupt. He put his brother in charge of ministries. They started stealing blind, and we were sending them suitcases of money. We bought off every provincial leader the same way with money. So no government institutions being built. Now we say we're going to build a military. Well, all we did is, first of all, we made two mistakes. One, we tried to build a military that modeled our military. Can't do that. I mean, the American military is based upon, a solid foundation of American culture, American education, American capabilities. It's built to meet it's built to absorb American citizens. Your average Afghan is illiterate. So why in God's name, how can you take an illiterate person and suddenly expect him to be able to maintain a vehicle? He doesn't even know how to drive. How can he...
Well, are the Taliban more literate? So far, the analogy you offered was like, they're like the toughest guys you can imagine from Kentucky. But what about that issue? Are they more educated or what?
Well, they're educated from a religious standpoint. Mm-hmm. Plus, their rank and file are probably all graduates of the Madras. So they can read Arabic and they can speak a little bit of Arabic, and mm-hmm. They might be able to read some Pashto. Their senior leadership is very well educated. Almost everybody has a university degree, probably from a place like London or Germany. Extremely well educated people, and again, they believe in what they're doing. But the point is, we built a military that was modeled after us, banded with people that couldn't do the task, and then we entrusted them to an establishment that didn't pay them on time, stole half their pay, didn't feed them, didn't give them leave, beat them, abused them. We talk about 300,000 Afghans. You'd be lucky if you got 200,000 to show up at any given time.
And how many Taliban? How many Taliban?
Hardcore fighters, 70, 80,000 of them. Mm-hmm. But these are 70, 80,000 guys who want to fight. Now, what I'll say is, we built this edifice called the Afghan army that can't fight. And we knew that. I mean, the irony is, we knew this. So what did we do? Rather than say, okay, well, let's go back to the drawing board and start over and build something that's good, we couldn't do that because people like General Petraeus had stood before Congress and told them how great the job that they were doing in building the Afghan security forces, and Congress believed them and gave them money. So we can't admit we made a mistake. So what we did is, in each Afghan organization, core level organization, we built a commando force where we went and we skimmed off the very best soldiers out of the Afghan military, and then we gave them specialized training. So these guys could fight. These guys are real good fighters. And they were disciplined. They were basically the Afghan equivalent of the Taliban. Hardcore people that are ready to die. And these guys fought and died. Right. I mean, when you look at the casualties that were taken, the Afghan army suffered 60,000 dead. In 2019, 10,900 dead. 2020, 10,900 dead. We don't know how many have died in 2021. We do know that they were fighting very, very hard, these commandos.
Yeah, so it's a sore point to kind of broadly dismiss all the Afghan fighters as useless.
You can't dismiss all the Afghan fighters, especially those who fought. Now, they did well when they had American advisors to call in close air support, when they had American helicopters to evacuate them. You'll fight hard if you believe that when you're wounded, you'll be evacuated and taken care of. You'll fight hard when you know that when you run out of ammunition, you call for resupply, it shows up. When you know that with that resupply will come food and water. So you fight hard. What happened after May is they went out there and they launched counterattacks against the Taliban. They're very successful. They beat the Taliban. Then they ran out of ammunition. They said, we need resupply. Nothing came. They ran out of food. They ran out of water. They had no air support. Next thing you know, they're in a village surrounded, out of ammunition. They surrender and they're gunned down. And so once that happened, even these brave commandos had to start retreating. They had to retreat because they had to find ammunition. They had to find the way to fight back. And that's what happened. It wasn't that they stopped fighting. They didn't stop having the will to fight. They stopped having the means of fighting, the means of resistance. It's one of the greatest betrayals in modern military history, what we did, not only to the Afghan army as a whole, but especially to this force of around 60,000 highly trained fighters that we basically abandoned to their death. And these are the guys that went on the tough missions. These are the guys that supported what we call the Omega teams, which are the assassination teams, or the Afghan equivalent of the Phoenix Project in Vietnam. Guys went out and assassinated Taliban leaders, went into Taliban villages, and killed the families of the Taliban. There's not a single one of them who will survive captivity if they're captured by the Taliban. They shouldn't survive captivity for what they did to the Taliban. If I were the Taliban, I'd execute them myself. But they were following the orders of their American masters. We put them in harm's way. They did what we expected them to do, and now we abandon. And I'll also say this: in order to be trained as one of these commandos, in order to be part of, for instance, one of these CIA teams, the 01, 02, 04 team, you had to be vetted, and sometimes the vetting took 6 months. These guys had all their biometrics taken, they had background checks. These are some of the most closely vetted people out there. So, they are very reliable. They're, in terms of loyalty to the United States. We should have no problem absorbing these people, but we've abandoned them.
Right. So some of these Taliban fighters, I imagine, are among the 5,000 prisoners that were released following the deal that Trump made, which brings up the question, what do you think about that deal?
We're not going to be able to successfully get out of Afghanistan if the Taliban don't want us to get out of Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. All right, let's just put it that way. If they wanted to, they would resist us the entire way. They would harass us. Remember when I said how dangerous it is to be the last airplane off the ground?
Yeah.
If the Taliban were fighting us, you don't want to be on that last airplane because you're probably not going to make it. It's going to be really, really ugly. The only way to make this happen with as few American casualties as possible is to cooperate with the Taliban, to treat them as partners. And in many ways, they are your partner. They're your partner in peace. That doesn't mean that they're your ally. And the irony is, the more we cooperate with the Taliban to ensure the reduction of American casualties or exposure to risk, the more we betray the Afghan government. Because we're basically empowering the force that is going to destroy the Afghan government. But we did this. We worked with them, and we had to release these prisoners. It was part of the deal. That's just the reality of losing a war. Remember, we lost this war. We didn't lose it militarily. Nobody could beat us militarily. But we lost it politically. We didn't win. And losers don't get to dictate the outcomes. So people go, well, you can't release 5,000. Well, you are if you want to get out of Afghanistan, because we didn't win. The winner gets to dictate the terms. The Taliban won. They get to dictate the terms. One of the terms they dictate is that you're going to release these 5,000 prisoners. If you don't, we'll continue to fight. We're not afraid to die for our cause. Understand that. They're not afraid to die for their cause. We don't want to lose any more Americans.
Yeah, but I'm a little fuzzy on what the Taliban committed to in exchange for the prisoners.
Not killing Americans. It's that simple.
Right.
To stop attacking Americans. And they did. From May until today, not a single American died in combat in Afghanistan. Not a single American died in combat.
And it's because of that deal.
It's 100% because of that deal. Wouldn't have happened without that deal. Every American will tell you, the Afghans lived up to their deal. Every general, the Afghans lived up to their agreement. The Afghans have not violated their agreement with us whatsoever.
Well, I know you can't. I know you can't give me an exact number, but roughly speaking, what would it have been in terms of casualties if not for that deal? Like how many?
Again, understand that the more troops we have in, on the one hand, you have greater exposure. Meaning, if you have 6,000 people in Afghanistan, you have 6,000 targets. But you also have the greater ability to dish out death and destruction. You have good, effective intelligence, and good combat support. So you're more lethal. And that lethality, in many ways, is a deterrent. The more lethal we are, the less willing the Taliban is to commit suicide. But as you start to reduce these numbers, you start to lose that lethality and the deterrence that comes with it. The Taliban could become emboldened. So there would come a crossover point somewhere around the 2,500 troop mark where we no longer have perfect intelligence. We no longer have perfect logistics. We no longer have perfect response. And our troops become very vulnerable. And that's when mistakes can happen. That's when weaknesses can be exploited. And, I can't give you a number, but I will tell you this. When the 7th Cavalry attacked the Indian encampment at Little Bighorn, it didn't take long for entire companies of Custer's men to be wiped out. I mean, the battle was over in a blink of an eye. It wasn't one of these long, drawn-out affairs where people were fighting heroically to the last stand. They got off their horses, tried to form a defensive line, and they were swarmed and they were killed instantly. It was over, done. The next cavalry troop retreated, got off, swarmed, dead. That's what happened. And that could have happened to us. It still can happen to us at the airport. The point I'm trying to make of why we need to get out on August 31st is that on September 1st, we could have Custer's last stand. Easily. We can't defend against it. We'll kill a lot of them, yeah, but we'll run out of ammunition. Or we'll just get swarmed, and then we'll die. We're in a very small place. And they come at us with tens of thousands, it's all over. Literally, that quick. We lose everybody. And every military commander knows this. They know that it's Dien Bien Phu worse. A couple mortar rounds and you shut that airport. No airplanes taking off. The enemy comes in close, our close air support doesn't work. They breach the perimeter and flank us, it's all over. It's the Alamo. We'll have a bunch of small Alamos with a bunch of Marines and soldiers hanging out fighting heroically till they run out of ammunition, which they will do rapidly. And then they're dead. Instantly. It's over in a matter of hours.
Well, I'm not saying at this point, but like say within the past couple of weeks, should Bagram have been reopened? Could it have been reopened?
Well, no. Once we shut it down, once the Taliban book it, it could only be what could have happened is that we could have gone to the Taliban and said, we need to evacuate. Rather than put 6,000 troops into Hamid Karzai International Airport, we'd like to work with you to reopen Bagram Airfield. And then you reopen it cooperatively.
Right.
But the notion of dropping in the 82nd Airborne and reopening it by force, no, now we're going to war against the Taliban.
Right.
We don't want to do that.
And who do we blame? Do we blame Biden or do we blame the generals? Do we blame the intel community?
Well, Biden is the president. The buck stops with him. I mean, you know, the thing about intelligence is, at the end of the day, you present your consumer with a range of options, a range of outcomes, and it's up to the consumer to pick the one that they trust the most. The military was arguing for a more robust presence. Biden had every right to tell him to pound sand. I mean, remember, Donald Trump is the only president that stood in the Pentagon in their conference room and stared, Mad Dog Mattis and all the other generals in the face and said, "You're a bunch of losers. You don't know how to win. You've lost Afghanistan. Quit telling me that you can win it if I give you a little bit more troops, a little bit more money. You've had 20 years and you've lost. That's all you've ever done is lose." And that's the truth.
Right, yeah. Biden doesn't have it in him to stand up to them. But that's kind of what
He did stand up to him to say, no, we're leaving. Now, but the problem is, once he made that decision, then it was colored by Blinken and the Secretary of State and Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, who now started looking at the optics. And the second you have political types looking at the optics of something, you're going to run into problems. This was never going to be pretty, but what it could have been is bloodless.
Well, so who do we blame for that in terms? You saying
Jake Sullivan, Tony Blinken, and Lloyd Austin. They should all be fired. Biden can't be fired because he's president. But at a minimum,
but they're the ones who decided on the manner in which the operation should be conducted.
Yes.
And to what degree were they rejecting better advice? I mean, I know you don't know exactly, but do you have any idea?
I mean, we'll only know when the military comes out. I will say that, the military is said to have provided options other than replicating Custer's Last Stand or Dien Bien Phu. That they weren't happy with this arrangement. This is a stupid arrangement. Anybody who will tell you that putting 6,000 troops into Kabul International Airport is a good plan is an idiot. And if they're wearing a uniform, it should be taken out. Now, if you're given that order by your civilian leadership, you have to execute the order, and that's what they're doing. But this was foolish.
Yeah. Well, that's what it looks like. But and I'm happy to blame Biden, but I also like to be fair. So, was there any?
Trump, I'll tell you this: anybody who says that Trump would have done a better job doesn't know what they're talking about, because Trump was never confronted with this.
So you're not saying he would have done the same thing or worse. You're saying we don't know.
We don't know.
Right. Now,
I'm not going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say, "Oh, if Trump had been in, this would never happen." We don't.
Did the deal Trump made burden the Biden administration with anything that they should not have been burdened with
No, the deal compelled Biden to accept reality, which is we have to leave Afghanistan.
which he wanted to do anyway.
He wanted to do anyway.
But
So
as far as any of the
circle-
specifics in the deal go, was he burdened in any way that he should not have been? In other words, could he say, hey, I would have done such and such better, but...
Well, but see, you can't, because the enemy gets a vote. The Taliban, remember the deal said you're out by May.
Yeah.
Biden blew past that date. The Taliban worked with him. The Taliban sat there and said, okay, but you're getting out, aren't you? And he said, yes, we're getting out by September 11th. The Taliban went, okay, we can live with that. We won't kill any Americans between May, when we should have been able to start killing Americans because you violated the agreement. But we're not going to do that between May and September. And when he said, we're just going to get out in July, and then he set an arbitrary date of August 31st, and Taliban went, okay, we trust you, August 31st, we're buying into that one. And then the Taliban did the smart thing. They said, that's a red line. We're done with you moving the bar. August 31st, we're holding you to that. Make it happen. So the only constraints that have been placed on Biden are the constraints he placed himself.
Okay. So maybe it was postponed. I don't know. These things don't always go off on schedule. But Biden was scheduled to address the nation while we were having this chat. So I'd like to close by giving you a chance to show how good a predictor you are. Can you take a guess as to what the essence of Biden's message was, and also what should he be saying now?
Well, at this stage in the game, the only thing we can do is complete the mission, which is to get out of Afghanistan by August 31st. Understanding that if we blow past that, we'll be at war with the Taliban, and it'll be 20 times worse than what it is now. I think he also needs to recognize that those who attacked us were ISIS, not the Taliban. Taliban are not the enemy, they're not the bad guys, and it's misplaced to say we need to get revenge against the Taliban. It's not the Taliban's fault. I think he needs to praise those who gave the ultimate sacrifice. He needs to mourn appropriately for the Afghan people who lost their lives, but he needs to also say that we need to stay the course, and that means that come Friday we stop shipping civilians, and by August 31st we're out of there.
Okay, and just to be clear, that means no military engagement, so to speak, between now and the exit, unless absolutely necessary?
Well, I would tell you this: if the intelligence capabilities in Afghanistan identify the perpetrators of the attack, and they are located somewhere that the Taliban can't be called upon to bring them to justice, then I would go to the Taliban and say we've located them and we want to kill them. And the Taliban should hopefully say, "Oh, kill as many as you want to." We're good with that. I wouldn't do it without going to the Taliban. It's not that I have to ask permission, but we need to recognize that Afghanistan is a sovereign state, and we need to respect the sovereignty of the Taliban, who govern Afghanistan today. That's the de facto truth. But I wouldn't be looking for revenge right now.
Right. And what about going?
To get our troops out.
And what about going beyond August 31st if the Taliban agrees to it?
You mean staying in?
No, I mean if just a few days or something. If it's deemed necessary to get X amount of people out, is that a possibility of the U.S. getting the Taliban to agree, saying, "Look, things happened that weren't planned, so let's have an extension"?
Look, if that's a conversation they're having with the Taliban agree to that, then that's fine. I would say that we cannot stay in Afghanistan one day longer than the Taliban agree to let us stay. So if the Taliban hold to August 31st as the red line, we got to get out by August 31st. That's the number one priority right now, because as many Marines as we're mourning their deaths today, it'll be tenfold on September 1st if we want to go to war with the Taliban.
Okay. And one final comment about just Joe Biden. I mean, it's kind of like a sport to mock him for being senile. But seriously, what do you think about his cognitive abilities and his fitness for serving as president? Above and beyond agreeing or disagreeing with any decision he made. What do you think about his fitness?
He's a 78-year-old man.
Mm-hmm.
There's plenty of 78-year-old men who think clearly. I think he thinks clearly. I think he can get tired easily. I think he can get distracted easily. But I think that when he's on, he can read a teleprompter as good as any politician. I think he's capable of cognitive thinking and expressing himself. He's a 78-year-old man, which means he's going to misspeak more often than a 60-year-old man. But I'm not one of these people that believes he's senile. I don't believe that he's stricken by Alzheimer's. I don't believe that he's a doddering old fool. I think he's a fool. I think he's old, but the two are mutually exclusive. I don't like Joe Biden. I despise Joe Biden. But I'm not going to sit here and take a cheap shot at Joe Biden. Joe Biden is a politician who's every bit as capable as any other 78-year-old politician in the United States of America. What we can't do is expect a 78-year-old man to perform as if he's a 60-year-old man. He's not. He's a 78-year-old man with a 78-year-old man's body and a 78-year-old man's brain. That means he's going to get tired, he's going to get confused, he's going to make mistakes.
Well, I think you've been kinder towards him than he was toward you back in that historical moment. And maybe we can reminisce about that in another chat, unless you feel like it right now.
Well, we've got to see what time it is.
Okay.
No, actually, I'm heading towards a divorce because my wife is waiting for me, and I'm not there to pick her up. So,
okay, it felt like it was about time to wrap it up. So let's save that story for our next chat. And
okay.
Since events are unfolding so quickly on the ground, I'll do my best to get this online as soon as possible. And thanks for stopping by.
Well, thanks for having me.
Okay, Scott, take care.